You're all so quiet. Oh my goodness.
Not to interfere with whatever you're doing.
Okay, well, it was very high tech. I was pushing this to Facebook. Anyway, we begin.
Thank you, Rabbi Marsha Tilchin. Thank you all for being here. It's so wonderful to have again a large number of people. Um, Last week, we basically went from the period of 4,000 years ago, the first Jew coming to the land of Canaan, until Joshua conquered the land of Israel, a period of about 750 years, and we had to squeeze it into 1 hour. This week, it's an even bigger challenge because we're going to cover a period from about 3,000 years ago until about 1,850, roughly, years ago. So it's quite a bit to cover within 1 hour. Um, there will be time at the end for questions. And if at any point something is really not clear as I present, just don't hesitate. Ask a question, unmute yourself, and we'll get going. So let's gonna start to set the stage. A lot of what we're gonna hear today has to do with setting the stage for essentially the message that I'm trying to transfer based upon the description of the class. So let's first set the stage. After Joshua conquered the land of Israel and the people of Israel were basically ruled by prophets and judges. And then when Samuel is the leader of the people of Israel, now this is about the year 1030 before the Common Era. The people of Israel come to Samuel and they say, we want a king. And Samuel is trying to talk him out of it. You know, the king will do this, the king will do that. But they want king like all the other nations around the land of Israel that had kings. So Samuel appointed Saul as the first king of Israel. By doing that, the first Commonwealth of Israel was established. There were three of them. We're going to address two today. The state of Israel is technically the third Commonwealth of Israel, but that's for another day. It's not really clear because the Bible doesn't tell us how long King Saul ruled. Most biblical commentators agree that it was about 20 years. Remember that number, 20. After King Saul, King David, about the year 1010 before the Common Era, became the king of Israel. And King David established Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There was never a different capital for Israel. It was the capital during the first Commonwealth, the second, and the present day Commonwealth of Israel. Jews never picked a different capital for themselves other than Jerusalem. Just to put it in perspective, Jerusalem and Zion, which is the old name of Jerusalem, are mentioned in the Bible 850 times. Is there anyone here that knows how many times the name Jerusalem is mentioned in the Quran or in the so-called Christian Bible? I'll tell you. In the Quran, it's not mentioned at all. And in the so-called Christian Bible, I don't like the term New Testament as if ours is the old and theirs is the new and improved, as if we're talking about laundry detergent. It's not. It's the Christian Bible, and 135 times. It just kind of puts in perspective the importance of Jerusalem to the different religion. I don't think everybody follows this logic, but in my twisted mind, that's how it goes. Jerusalem as we know it today, the old city of Jerusalem, is not the city of David. It's not the Jerusalem mentioned in the Bible. The walls around the city as we know it today were actually built by the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, 500 years ago. The Temple Mount is still the Temple Mount. The Western Wall is still the Western retaining wall the King Herod built. But the city of David, the Jerusalem that David established as a capital, is about 200 yards east of the Dung Gate. The Dung Gate is the gate closest to the entrance to the Western Wall. So if you go out that gate where you go through security and you head east about 200 yards, you'll come into the entrance of the city of David. It was sitting on a very steep hill. There's an Arab neighborhoods there now, and it was surrounded by walls. The Bible described how uh, the city was conquered by the soldiers of King David, Yoav ben Zeruiah, the leader, the chief of staff, his general. Um, and also, there's interesting discussion in the Bible about the tunnel that they dug at the bottom. The water source, to this day, by the way, the city of Jerusalem used that well to pump water out. But the water source is at the bottom of the hill. So people will have to come down. But what would they do at time of war? They couldn't leave the walls because then the enemies will enter. And so they dug up tunnel. It's interesting that the Bible describes how they dug up the tunnel from both ends. No laser back there, and yet they met. And the Bible described the excitement when they were very close and they can hear the banging on the wall before they broke through. And what's amazing, it was not a straight line. There are curves to it. Today, if you go to the city of David archaeological dig, you can literally walk that tunnel. You can see the water source. And this is how they brought water into the city. This is also how they were able to get in and out of the city when the city was surrounded by enemies, to get food, to send messages, etc. What's amazing about this archaeological dig is that you literally see the houses of royalty at the top of the hill and the rest of the houses down below on the slope source, which explain how King David could see Bathsheba bathing herself on the roof of her house because he was much higher than she was. Remember the story? He saw her bathing, he lusted for her, he wanted her, he got her pregnant, and in order to cover the sin, he arranged for her husband, Uriah, to be sent to the front of the line where he got killed so he can have Bathsheba to himself. Clearly, King David was not pure, and although he's considered the greatest king in the Jewish history, he was less than perfect. Like most of our leaders, nobody was perfect because we don't idolize people, we idolize God. You can see the walkway from the city of David to the Temple Mount, literally about 200, 250 yards of a walkway. And the mikvehs that were on both sides of the walkway where people will immerse themselves before they enter the Temple Mount. And the little shops where people would buy something in case they came from a long distance and they didn't want to carry something with them, they could buy it right there in Jerusalem before they enter or they brought their offerings, lamb, the first of the harvest, etc. Um, the tunnels are absolutely wonderful. So next time you're in Jerusalem, I really encourage you to, in addition to seeing the Western Wall and other important Jewish things in and around Old City of Jerusalem, go to see the City of David. It's absolutely phenomenal to see it. After 40 years, King David dies. So now 20 years for Saul, 40 years for David. He dies, and his son Solomon becomes the leader, the king. Solomon also ruled for about 40 years. He's the one that built the temple, the first temple in Jerusalem. He did a lot of things, not all of them great. Nevertheless, we know about 1,000 wives and enslaving the people and raising taxes and taking people for 1 month at a time to help in the building of the temple and bringing wood and stones, etc. Together, King Saul 20, King David 40, King Solomon 40 is 100 years. When King Solomon dies, his son, Rehavam, becomes the king. Before I go to Rehavam, just to set the stage for what's going to come later. During the time the people of Israel were in the desert for about 40 years, at each of the 42 stops along the way, They used the Mishkan, the tabernacle, as the place to worship, to bring sacrifices, etc. Once they entered the land of Israel, Shiloh, was the place where all the sacrifices were brought to. It's a period of about 350 years. By the way, the Talmud says 367 years that everybody went to Shiloh, brought sacrifices 3 times a year, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot. In 2013, Israeli archaeologists discovered the spot of Shiloh. They found the altar. They also did carbon dating that goes back to the time of the kings and the time that the people entered the land of Israel. They even found DNA of animals in the area. Several things you can see it online, by the way, if you want to see the location of Shiloh that was discovered. It's just north of Jerusalem in the mountainous area that was allocated to the tribe of Ephraim. We bless Ephraim, the son of Joseph, on Friday night when we bless our sons. It's really interesting that during those 350 years or 367 years, according to the Talmud, it wasn't uninterrupted. There were times of war. And during times of war, the Mishkan, the Holy of Holies, was moved from Shiloh. It was moved to Givon, which is north of Jerusalem, or Kiryat Yearim, the city of forest, north of Jerusalem also, or it was moved to Bet Shemesh, which is west of Jerusalem. Once King Solomon established the temple, for about 1,000 years, minus about 50 years that between the first temple and the second temple, everybody went to Jerusalem. And when I talk about the city of David and the walkway and the mikvehs and the shops, etc., this is where people went for about 1,000 years. Again, except for that period that temple did not exist between the first and the second one. So now we're in the year 930, roughly, before the Common Era, and King Solomon dies. His son, King Rehoboam, became king. King Solomon was smart and a good politician. So although he raised taxes, although he took people to work at the building of the temple, away from their fields, away from their flock, if they were shepherd, away from whatever job they were doing, they were taken away. It's almost like reserve duty for 30 days at a time. He still was smart enough and good politician enough to keep the kingdom together. His son was not smart as he was, and he was not a good politician. Instead of heeding the advice of the old advisor that served his dad very well, he was listening to the young crowd, to his friends, the young advisors. And they basically made life even more miserable than it was before. And as a result, King Rehoboam got himself a revolt on his hand. Someone named Yerovam led a revolt against him. And when all the dust settled, the first Commonwealth of Israel ceased to exist. 100 years after it was established, it ceased to exist. Instead of this Commonwealth, 2 kingdoms were established. The kingdom of Israel, sometimes referred to as the Northern Kingdom or the Kingdom of Samaria, was to the north of Jerusalem, along the Mediterranean coast, and the 2.5 tribes that were east of the Jordan River, Reuven, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, were part of it. The kingdom of Judah included 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. We are descendant of the tribe of Judah, Judaism. And I'll tell you in a moment why we are descendant of the tribe of Judah. The tribes that made the kingdom of Israel or the northern kingdom were on very fertile land and had access to the Mediterranean Sea, therefore to the shipping route the Phoenician shipping route that went from where about Turkey is today to Carthage, which is the island off the coast of Tunisia called Jerba today. It was a shipping route, and commerce went along that route. There was also a lot of shipping going on land between the empires of the north, Assyrian Empire, Babylonian, Persian, the empire to the south, like Egypt. Later on, we know about the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. The land of Israel is like a bridge between three continents, between Europe, Asia, and Africa. That's the known world at the time. Columbus was not born yet, so nobody knew about North and South America. Nobody knew about Antarctica or the islands of Australia. And so everybody wanted to control this bridge that control access to the three continents. The kingdom of Judah was landlocked in the mountainous region of Jerusalem and the Judean hill. It was not attractive to the foreign powers that lived around the land of Israel. It was very stable. It lasted about 400 years, and it had 20 kings during that time. The kingdom of Israel, on the other hand, was not stable at all. It only lasted 200 years and had 19 kings during that time. Some of them lasted very, very few, short time before somebody killed them and took their spot. They were also sitting on very attractive land, both fertile and accessible to the ocean, to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. The route, shipping route on one hand, and land route for commerce were all controlled by the kingdom of Israel. And so in the year 722, before the Common Era, the Assyrian Empire attacked the kingdom of Israel. They did not attack the kingdom of Judah. And by the way, the Assyrian Empire is not the first to attack the kingdom of Israel. The Bible described 4 different wars that they had during these 200 years that they lasted. As a result of this attack, the Assyrian Empire occupied the kingdom of Israel, demolished the kingdom of Israel, and exiled the people. Most of them were killed, but those that were not were exiled outside the land of Israel, so they would be less inclined to practice Judaism. There is no Shiloh or Jerusalem for them to go to if they are in Babylon or if they are in the Syria or Turkey area today or Lebanon, etc. We call those 10 tribes that form the kingdom of Israel the lost tribes. If you ever heard the name or the term the lost tribes, that's what it is. Because there's nothing in recorded history that tells us what happened to those 10 tribes. They're literally gone forever. However, in the last 60 years, on at least 2 occasions, people claim to be lost tribes of the kingdom of Israel. In the 1960s, the Jews of India, they're called Bnei Israel, petitioned the Israeli government saying they're Jews from the tribe of Menashe. That's the tribe that was half on the east side of the Jordan River and half on the west side of the Jordan River, just south of the Sea of Galilee. So they say that they are descendant of this tribe, Menashe, and of Persian Jews that traveled to India for commerce. So the state of Israel sent rabbi, historian, scientist, etc., to check if it's valid. And it turned out that it was valid. And in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a mass immigration of Indian Jews to the state of Israel. I'll tell you a story I'm not proud of. I was about 5th grade, so maybe 1970. 1971 probably. And a girl named Rena Ashton came to my classroom. She was a new immigrant from Bombay at the time. She went through Ulpan with her family to learn Hebrew. And then the family moved to a certain area where there were lots of new immigrants from India, Jews from India. And she came to my school and she was placed in my classroom. The teacher asked me to help her with homework. So she gave me the address. And that same afternoon after school, I went to her home to help her with homework. She lived in a 4-story building. As soon as I entered the lobby of the building, she was on the 2nd floor. I got this whiff of curry, a smell I've never had before, didn't know. I love Indian food today, but mind you, think of a mind of a 10, 11-year-old. And I immediately walked out. So now I'm standing outside the building and I don't know what to do. The only thing I can think of in my limited capacity at the time is hold your breath, run up to the 2nd floor, ring the doorbell, and hopefully they'll open the door before you run out of breath. But then the second choice that popped into my head, what if the same smell is inside the house? What am I going to do? I turned around and I went home. It's more than 50 years later, and every time I think about it, I feel really bad about it. In high school, I had 2 friends that were Jews of India. The family came from Israel, from India, and actually they were good friends. And I keep in touch with them through Facebook to this day. Incidentally, there are about 90,000 Jews of India, 24 of them that came from India, the rest Israeli born, 2nd generation now, Israeli born, living in Israel today. The second group that petition the state of government and say they're part of a lost tribe are the Jews of Ethiopia. Some call them Beta Israel, some call them Falasha Mora. Nevertheless, they petition the state of Israel and they said they're a lost tribe before the temple was destroyed because they didn't know anything about the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Talmud. They didn't know anything about Shulchan Aruch. They were practicing the Judaism that was practiced before Jews changed from a religion of pilgrimage and sacrifice to a religious of prayer and study. And it's interesting, there are 170,000 Jews today living in Israel that are either born in Ethiopia or native of the state of Israel. They're in every part of society. Something to keep in mind when somebody tells you that Israel is an apartheid state, tell them about it. There are certain practices that the Jews of Ethiopia, the Falasha Mora or Beta Israel had, that didn't exist in New Judaism. One of them, it's probably the most significant, is a holiday they call Sigd. I think another name for it is Melela. 29 day of Cheshvan, so about 50 days after Rosh Hashanah, they all gather together. They have a kes, a leader that leads that, and they all prostrate. The word sigd comes from an ancient word of Hebrew, lisgod, to worship. And with that holiday, they literally mimic and relive the giving of the Torah, when everybody prostrated, fell on their face down, bowing down essentially. In 2008, the state of Israel recognized that holiday of the 29th of Cheshvan as an official Israeli government holiday. So if you're a government employee, that day is off. And many other businesses follow. It's a big deal. It's a big deal because of the 12 months on the Hebrew calendar, 11 months had a holiday. Cheshvan, the second month, was often called Mar Cheshvan, Bitter Cheshvan, or Mr. Cheshvan. It could go both ways because it didn't have a holiday on it. Well, since 2008, it does have an official holiday on it. So every day on the Hebrew calendar, every month on the Hebrew calendar, has a holiday now associated with it. You know, obviously Tishrei, the high holiday, Cheshvan, Sig, Kislev, we have the Hanukkah, and just keeps going on and on. In recent years, there's no final decision on it, but in recent years, there's a group of Jews in China that claim that they are also lost tribe. There has not been a final decision on it. It's still going on in the process. The Jews of India literally practice Judaism as we know it. The Jews of Ethiopia did not. About 2 generations back, Christian missionary convinced them that Christianity is the new Judaism. And so they converted, mass conversion. But they never let go of the tradition they kept, which is exactly biblical practice of Judaism. Gathering, sacrifices, prostrating, etc. And this is why it was easy to accept. I should just tell you, generally speaking, when a Jew converts to another religion, in the eyes of Judaism, that person is still a Jew. So when Robert Zimmerman, Bob Dylan, converted to Christianity and later came back to Judaism, he did not have to convert back to Judaism. He is a Jew. It happens sometimes in the state of Israel where a woman will fall in love with an Arab man, a Jewish woman, and she would marry that person in a mosque and convert to Islam. And if at one point she wants to come back, she comes back. There was recently a story about a woman that did that and lived in Gaza. And at one point, she wanted to come back to Israel, and she did. And so did her son, is recognized as an Israeli citizen, even though he was born and lived and everything inside Gaza, educated, etc. Okay, so in the second book of King, I think it's chapter 17, the Bible describes how the Assyrian Empire that demolished the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, brought different people to settle the land. Because remember, they either killed or exiled the Jews. They brought different people, their own people, from the Assyrian Empire, which is north of the current state of Israel today. They brought them in. And when they came in, they had difficult times. The Bible describes how they were attacked by wild animals. They had difficulties cultivating the land. They didn't quite know. They were not farmers. They didn't quite know. And they believed that because they don't believe in the local God, they have all these problems. So they asked the kingdom of Judah to send a priest to teach them how to be Jewish and to convert them to Judaism. And the kingdom of Judah did. And they became known as Shomronim, Samaritan. I'll come back to it. Don't confuse Good Samaritan and the Samaritans today with those people, different people. When the Babylonian Empire when the Babylonian Empire invaded the land of Israel and destroyed the kingdom of Judah and exiled the people out, those that were not killed. In ancient time, when one nation defeated another nation, they usually killed those that pose a military threat, exiled those that posed a political threat, and let the average people stay on the land to work the land and pay taxes. Otherwise, what's the point of capturing other lands? You need people to pay taxes and enrich the empire, in addition to the fact that they grew in size. And so when they came back after Cyrus the Great, the leader of the Persian Empire, defeated the Babylonian Empire, he allowed the Jews to come back. The Samaritan came back too. And there was a big argument, who's really the Jews? The Samaritan, the people that converted by the priests of the kingdom of Judah, or the people of Judah? We all know who won. Today, there is a community in Israel called Samaritan, Shomronim. They practice something very peculiar that is very Jewish in nature, the Paschal Lamb. But most of the other things that they do align with the Islamic religion, with Islam. And so they don't consider themselves Jews, and the Israeli rabbinate does not consider them Jews. They're Shomronim or Samaritan. So although they have a practice that's similar to Judaism in nature, they don't consider themselves Jews. Many of them do serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. Much like the Druze is a sect of Islam, Shia Islam, but they're always very loyal to the country they live in. So they serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. There are some Muslims in the Israeli Defense Forces. There are some Arab Christian in Israeli Defense Forces, but they're not required. Most of them volunteer. And so now the kingdom of Judah is attacked by the Babylonian Empire. The small communities are no match for the big empire of Babylon, and so they fall quickly. But the city of Jerusalem does not. The year 588 before the Common Era, the city of Jerusalem is surrounded by the Babylonian Empire. The date is Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of the 4th month of Tevet on the Hebrew calendar. It's a minor fast day. It took 18 months for that siege around the city before they actually breached the wall. They breached the wall on the 17th day of Tammuz, 586 before the Common Era, about 18 months after they lay siege around the city. That's also a minor fast day. And 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after they breached the wall, they literally destroyed the temple and Jerusalem, set it on fire, tumbled every building, crushed everything, killed everybody they could. And they exiled the people. You know, we all know that it's Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, in the year 586 before the Common Era. But if you look at the Bible, you'll see that in the book of King, they said that he was the 7th, and in the book of Prophet, they said that he was the 10th of Av. It's really the rabbis of the Talmud that told us that he was the 9th and associated the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. We know there were many other things that happened during Tisha B'Av over the years, like the expulsion from England, the expulsion from Spain, etc. But it's just important to note that in the Bible, there are conflicting dates, and then the Talmud reconcile it to a different date. The 7th of Av, the 10th of Av, the Talmud says it's the 9th of Av. Without a temple, people didn't know how to practice Judaism, because Judaism was essentially a religion of pilgrimage and sacrifices. And where are you going to do that? There is no temple. Jerusalem is in ruin. And new kinds of Judaism started to emerge. We know about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but that came much later. We are still after the destruction of the first temple. The people in the land of Israel, mind you, they're mostly simple people, farmer and shepherd, that were left behind to pay. They even revolted against Gedaliah ben Amikam, the governor that the Babylonian appointed. And they killed him, they conspired and killed him. That's another one minor day that we fast, Tzom Gedaliah, because the Jews conspired. And when you think about it, the Babylonian allowed a Jew, Gedaliah ben Amikam, to rule or to govern the land. But after the Jews conspired and killed him, that was no more. The Babylonian appointed their own people to control the land of Israel and to rule over it. Nevertheless, as people come back from Babylon, and not everybody came back. This is why the Babylonian Talmud is so much more, carrying so much more weight than the Jerusalem Talmud. And by the way, was mostly developed in the Galilee, not in Jerusalem. Nevertheless, it's called the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is the primary Talmud. I mind you, there was sages that were going back and forth between, but most of the important sages were in Babylon. Some scientists and historians say only about 43,000 Jews returned. So the Jews in the land of Israel are not religious leaders. They're simple people, and they don't know how to practice Judaism. They're forgetting how to practice Shabbat, issues of marriage and divorce and donation to temple or holy places, and they didn't quite know. The book of Daniel explains some of those things. So the leaders, the religious leader in Babylon, send Ezra the scribe, to the land of Israel to help the Jews. There's the Greek Empire that's starting to become big, and the influence of this modern era is starting to come into the land of Israel as it did into the entire region. At the same time that the people don't know how to practice things. So Ezra comes back and he helps build the temple, reform Judaism slightly. There are certain things like establishing the cycle of Torah reading, the early stages of a synagogue. About 2,400 years ago, the synagogue was established as a permanent institution. But before that, there were all those things that took place to make it like a synagogue. There's emergence of Sadducees, follower of Tzadok, the priest, follower of the priest, and Pharisees, what we know today as rabbis. Things start to change because the practice as it was known is no more. And Ezra the scribe was so wonderful in what he did. It literally saved Judaism at the time. The rabbis of the Talmud in Masechet Gittin, that's the tractate that deals with divorce. Get, plural of get is Gittin, saying that if the Torah was not given to Moses, it would have been given to Ezra the scribe. This is how important he was. He was the leader of Jewish organization. He was reforming Judaism. He was establishing things. He was fixing what needed to be fixed. He restored the order of Judaism in the land of Israel. All this one person, Ezra the scribe. Major, we probably don't give him enough credit, and we should, because what he did is remarkable. So about 450 before the Common Era, about 2,400 years ago. So a synagogue is established as a permanent institution because of Ezra the scribe. And the cycle of reading Torah begins. It's the first really transition from sacrificial type of a religion to studying and praying type of a religion. We are not the same religion that we were 2,400 years ago. Today, we are a very different religion. And we'll get back to this in a moment. So let's jump. The year 336 before the Common Era. Alexander the Great conquered the land of Israel along with a lot of other land in the Middle East. And the Jews now are under the control of the Greek Empire. There's still Jews that govern the land, but under the umbrella of the Greek Empire. People start to stray away from Judaism because Greek was the modern era, was the new disco of the 70s and the new rap of the new century. Everybody wanted to be like the Greek. I think when I came to the US, everybody wanted to be like Michael Jordan, the basketball player, and he was on commercials for cereals and things of that nature. Everybody wanted to be like the Greek. And this was the case for almost 170 years. The year 165, before the Common Era, because of frustration with the Greek control and the limitation that the Greek kept adding more and more limitation on the Jews and on the practice of Judaism, the Maccabees revolted. We all know the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabee, the Hashmonaim, not far from what's called Tel Aviv Airport, which is really Lod Airport. There was a community called Hashmonaim, And from there, a father, Matityahu, and his children, we all know Judah the Maccabee, of course, that led this war of attrition, attack and retreat, attack and retreat. And amazingly, in the year 63 of the Common Era, I'm sorry, the year 140 of the Common Era, they won. They literally won that war of attrition. And the Maccabees appointed themselves the king of Israel. By doing so, the second Commonwealth of Israel was established. This is the year 140 before the Common Era. There was a problem with that. A lot of the people didn't like the fact that the Maccabees, they were Cohens, made themselves kings. The kings of Israel, everybody believed, would come from the stock of David. The Cohens were the Cohen, in charge of the temple and things of that nature, and the stock of David, David and Solomon, etc., would be the king. So some of the people, like the Pharisees, didn't like it at all. There are even stories about Hashmonaim kings killing many Pharisees. There's a famous story, you can look it up. I don't want to spend 10 minutes setting all that stage, how he invited Pharisees to a party and he wore a hat of a Cohen, and somebody said, oh, you shouldn't, you should leave that to somebody else. And he killed a lot of Pharisees leader, the Hashmonaim king. Nevertheless, the Hashmonaim now are king, and maybe 85 years or so later, 90 years later, now we're in the year 63 before the Common Era, the Roman general Pompey conquering Jerusalem. This is probably one of the saddest stories of the Jews in the land of Israel. When the Hashmonaim queen, Shlom Tzion, Salome, dies, her son, Hyrcanus, the oldest son, becomes the king. Her third son, Aristobulus, mind you, Greek names, to kings of Israel. Her third son had good relationship with the army. He was a strong person. He didn't like the fact that his weak, amiable brother is king, so he revolted against him. He, in fact, made himself king at the end of this revolt. The problem is that the people didn't like it at all, because the people remember what happened with previous revolts and how the whole nation suffered. So they asked the brothers to come up with a solution. The brothers, very unwisely, decided to consult with General Pompey that just finished conquering the Assyrian Empire to the north. So they went to see him and they laid their story. General Pompey was thinking, I should side with the weak brother so that he will become king, and then I can literally just march into the land of Israel and take over without really fighting a war. That's exactly what happened. Essentially, the Roman Empire was invited to conquer the land of Israel. Once Hyrcanus became the king again, the weak brother, the amiable brother, General Pompey just marched in. And when General Pompey marched in, he still allowed the Jews to govern themselves, but he started to put limitation, and he was controlling the land of Israel. In fact, they changed the name of that place to the land of Israel, Kingdom of Rome, or they called it a Roman province of Judea. And then now let's jump to the year 37. This is 103 years after the Hashmonaim established the second Commonwealth of Israel. So the year 37 before the Common Era. There's strife going on between the different governors that control different part of the land. At the same time that the Roman Empire putting pressure. And the Roman got tired of it. and they kicked all the governors, and they appointed King Herod as the king of the Jews. That's actually a proclamation in the Roman Senate. You can see it online if you want. That designated King Herod the king of the Jews. King Herod was an Edomite. The rabbi didn't consider them Jews, although they considered themselves Jews. They were descendant of Esau, right? The brother of Jacob, the people of Israel. Nevertheless, King Herod now is the king of Israel, appointed by the Roman, and the second Commonwealth of Israel ceased to exist because now the Roman controlled who governed the land of Israel. Look, the first one lasted 100 years, and the second one lasted 103 years, roughly 100 years as well. I certainly hope the third Commonwealth of Israel lasts forever. But I have seen people that say, oh, it's going to disintegrate, especially before October 7, when there was a great deal of strife last summer in Israel in favor of the government, against the government, and back and forth. I don't subscribe to the Chicken Little syndrome of the sky is falling, so I don't think the state of Israel will implode. God forbid, but this is what happened with some people when they just think that things will happen. We all know that the Jews revolt against the Roman in the year 67 of the Common Era, and as a result, the temple was destroyed. Jerusalem was destroyed. The people were exiled. Many people were killed. It's the first revolt that happened in the first millennia, I should say. It's not the only one. But they started a revolt. The Roman didn't like it. One thing the Roman wanted is people not to revolt against them and to pay taxes. And they could not allow any dissent. They could not allow any revolt, and they could not allow people not to pay taxes. And it's interesting that the Jews really kind of, while they didn't like King Herod, etc., they didn't really do much against it until the year 6 of the Common Era. The Roman created a census. They wanted to know who lives where so they can collect taxes more efficiently. And a new group of Jews, remember the Sadducees and Pharisees, a new group came into being, the Zealots. They called themselves Saccharii, which is Latin for dagger men, knife men. They would hide knives under their clothes, going to the market. If they see anybody talking to Roman soldiers or cooperating with Roman secretaries, etc., they would kill those people. Those zealots are also the people that were in Jerusalem, and they're the one that burned the food storage because they were thinking with the food storage burned, the people will have no choice but to go outside the wall, fight the Roman. It didn't work like that. In fact, the people started to starve, which hurt morale. And as people were dying, people were eating corpses, which again hurt morale. And they became very weak. And that allowed the Roman to breach the walls and destroy Jerusalem and destroy the temple. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai left Jerusalem in a coffin. He actually tried to deal with those zealots. His brother-in-law was the leader of the zealots. And he went to him and he said, you need to control your people. They're going to ruin Jerusalem and ruin our chances against the Roman. And the brother-in-law told Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'm afraid to say anything because they will kill me. They're this far out as zealots. There's a story, an interesting story. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai leaves Jerusalem in a coffin, and he meets with Vespasian. Vespasian was the general that surrounded Jerusalem. His son, Titus, is the one that destroyed Jerusalem. Nevertheless, he meets with him, and he tells him, I had this vision that you will become the king of Rome, the Caesar. Vespasian says to him, you deserve 2 debts. One, for having that vision and not coming early to tell me about it. And two, for talking against the current Caesar in Rome. As they are speaking, a messenger comes and tells General Vespasian, Caesar in Rome died. The Senate appointed you a Caesar. You need to go to Rome. Vespasian is really happy. He just heard this prophecy and it came into being. So he tells Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, this is according to the Talmud, ask anything you want and I will grant it. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai could have said, save Jerusalem, save the temple. He didn't. We all know what he asked, right? He asked to be allowed to go to Yavne and not to be disturbed, and nor the sages of Yavne to be disturbed. And that's when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai completely changed Judaism. He knew the temple will fall. He knew the Roman will win. He knew that there will be no Judaism as we have known it up to that point. There'll be no place to do a pilgrimage to. There'll be no place to do sacrifices. And so he reformed it. He made us a religion of prayers, a religion of study, all in Yavne. Yavne is kind of in the center of Israel, maybe 15, 20 miles south of the airport, or about 15 miles south of Tel Aviv if you come from a different direction. There's one last element that I want to touch just before we end this area about the year 135. When Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70, some of those zealots that I've mentioned escaped Jerusalem through the tunnels and went to Masada. I'm not a big fan of the zealot. I know that even when I was in the Israeli Defense Forces as a paratrooper, they took us to the Western Wall and they took us to Masada to do the swearing. I didn't know back then that the zealot burned the food storage. The zealots is what really caused the defeat of Jerusalem. The zealots are the one that attacked Jewish community near Masada, especially the village of En Gedi, which is the water fountain at the bottom of Masada. They killed men. They kidnapped women and children as slaves. Those are the zealots. And then we know that at the end, because they were surrounded by the Roman, and the Roman kept building a ramp up because they couldn't reach it otherwise, they all committed suicide. Some people see them as heroes. I don't. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't ask any of you to follow the same thing. But it really didn't end there. There was another revolt. Remember, there was revolt that started before the temple was destroyed. There's another revolt that's hardly ever spoken about. It's called Mered Agetaot in Hebrew, the rebellions of the exiles. In English, it's called the Kitos War. The Jews of Cyprus and the Jews of Egypt rebelled against the Roman Empire. They were crushed. And it didn't take long to crush them. And there was the second rebellion against the Roman by the Jews. And then there was a third one, the Bar Kokhba revolt. Bar Kokhba means son of star. His real name was not Bar Kokhba, it was Shimon ben Kusiba. But he gave himself the name Bar Kokhba, son of star, to denote messianic aura to his name. And some of the people believed him to be the Messiah. Amazingly, Rabbi Akiva was one of those people. There's quite a few writing by Rabbi Akiva that looked at him as this savior that the prophet spoke about that will save the Jews. He was a good tactician. He was a good military leader. He was a good fighter. And he was winning again and again and again against the Roman. And as he was winning, the territory under his control kept growing. The Romans sent troops from Egypt. He defeated them. They sent troops from the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia today. He defeated them. They sent troops from the north, from where is Syria today. He defeated them. And each time he kept growing his territory, or the territory under his control. He designated himself Nasi. Nasi in ancient Hebrew means leader. In modern Hebrew, it means president or head of state. He issued coins for commerce, for transaction. At the top of the coin, there was a star, like him, Bar Kochva, the son of star. But the Roman couldn't allow that to keep going. Remember, the Roman didn't like dissent or rebellion and didn't like it when people didn't pay taxes. He represented both. So they decided they need to crush Bar Kochva and his 10,000 soldiers. They took the best soldiers they have throughout the Roman Empire. They brought the best general they have, Julius Severus, which just crushed the revolt in the English Isle. They brought him all the way from England to the land of Israel with 50,000 soldiers. And those 50,000 soldiers, the best legionnaires the Roman Empire had, were too much for Bar Kochva and his people. And they didn't just kill the 10,000 soldiers of Bar Kochva. They killed 580,000 Jews that lived in the land of Israel. They destroyed literally every single Jewish community in the land of Israel. This was the year 135 of the Common Era, the Bar Kochva revolt. Some people see Bar Kochva as an hero. I'm not going to argue the point, but I should tell you that the Talmud, the rabbis of the Talmud, did not see him at all like that. They call him Bar Kusiba, the son of lies, because he brought such a disaster on the people. Many people also died, in addition to those 580,000, from starvation or while they were exiled on the way to wherever they were exiled to. Roughly 600,000 Jews were killed during this revolt. It's the biggest disaster to befall the Jews until the Holocaust happened. 600,000 Jews. And to make matter worse, as if it's not bad enough, all of those things, King Hadrian, the Caesar of Rome at the time, changed the name of the land again from the province, the Roman province of Judea, to the Roman province of Syrian Palestina. Please don't confuse the Palestinian people today with that name. It's two different things. The Roman knew that the Philistines were enemies of the Jews in biblical time, and they figured, oh, we can make it even worse, not even letting them have the name Judea on that province. We'll call it something else. And that's basically, a period of maybe from 3,000 years ago until about 1,850 years ago. I see that we're about 2 minutes past the time I was supposed to end, so I'll finish and open it for questions. Thank you all for listening. I'm happy to answer any question. Yes, Ellie, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I am confused about the lineage of us Jews. With this lecture coming from kings and all these people fighting and killing, and they were mixing with other tribes that were not Jewish, or maybe I don't know, they call them Hebrews, I believe. But then by the time that we enter Jerusalem, or Canaan, these people integrated with other races, with other religions. And so where's the purity of our blood? I'm confused, if you can explain that to me.
Certainly. It's hard for any particular person to trace family history back. I'll give you an example. Maimonides, 800 years ago, Cordova, Spain, Morocco, Tunisia, Israel, and Egypt. That's where he died. He was born in Cordova, he died, Cordova, Spain. Said that his family goes back to the house of David, to King David. But I've never seen a family tree that he wrote. My grandfather's brother, he was a rabbi in the south of Israel, a chief rabbi of the Negev, Rabbi Eretz Mymon, did the family tree going back to Maimonides, 800 years. I asked him on my bar mitzvah, during my bar mitzvah, because he stood for his brother. My grandfather died just before my bar mitzvah. And I asked him, how did you go back 800 years? And he said, Jews leave footprints behind. I didn't understand. I was 13. And I said, what? And he said, when he finished rabbinical school, his grandparents were alive and they remembered their grandparents. So he had everything going back to the beginning of the 19th century. He only had 600 years to go, as if it's nothing. But what he did is he checked archives, Gniza, and he checked cemeteries, because on our tombstones we write so-and-so, the son of so-and-so. And that's how he was able to go back and back across North Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. And he said whenever he got stuck and he couldn't find the next person up, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, he would pay the guard of the cemetery with half a bill. He will take, say, $100 bill, cut it in half, hand it to him and say, find me this name and I'll give you the other half. And a day or two later, you would find that next grave. So we don't have anything. What we have is general history. And the general history tells us that there's nothing in its recorded history about the kingdom of Israel, those 10 tribes. We do have history about the kingdom of Judah, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. And so we know that we are related to it. Now, that's not to say that there were no mixing and conversion. During pogroms, there were many rapes, and some children were born as a result of rape. But a Jewish person born to his mother, right? Or a person that chooses to be a Jew by choice. So we don't really know if you and I are related to Moses or to Joshua or to King David or to whoever, but we have kind of chain of events and history and people that remain Jews throughout the time. And that's how we know we are. We know who the first Jew was, Abraham, who came to the land of Canaan 4,000 years ago. And somewhere around the world, as we speak, there's a new Jewish boy or girl being born right now. And we just continue 4,000 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Of
Sure.
course.
Yeah. Okay, I have two questions that are not related. The first one is, I had thought that the Israelites had invited, or the Jews, the Roman Empire in to protect them against Egypt. That I had thought, I had read or heard that, so you have the Empire of Egypt to the southwest and the Assyrians, and that they were caught in the middle, and that there are in archaeological sites Egyptian army outposts or police outposts in different sites. So, but you mentioned that they were invited in because of the northern Assyrians. So is there any validity to the thing about Egypt inviting also the Mymon to, or what was it a combination?
None of them is mutually exclusive. As I described, the two brothers, one revolting against the other, and the fact that the Roman Empire was essentially invited to control the land of Israel, that's part of history. Now, that's not to say that there was never a conflict between empires in the north and the south. Everybody wanted to control the land of Israel. I mentioned it's a bridge between three continents. You know, when the Babylonian Empire invaded and destroyed the land of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, they went after that to Egypt, and they did the same thing there. The Egyptian Empire, as we knew it in biblical time, is not the Egyptian people today.
Right.
Those are tribes that came from the south, from Sudan, because the Babylonian Empire destroyed. There was constant strife and battles between empires to the north and empires to the south, like the Egyptian Empire in the south and the Roman Empire or the Assyrian Empire or the Greek Empire to the north, because everybody wanted to control the same land. But in this particular case, that was not it. Nobody really wanted to control the kingdom of Judah. It's mountains, it's landlocked, it's not sitting on any main route. Commerce does not go through mountain. They go on flatland along the shore. Seafaring people like the Phoenician wanted to do commerce along the Mediterranean shore. Nobody cared about going 50 miles inland into the mountains. It's not even easy to get there before the train was invented. And so I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. What I'm saying is that they invited the Egyptian. There were other times they invited the Romans to come in. There were other times that the Egyptian Empire was a threat, and nobody invited the Assyrian or Babylonian or Persian Empire or Greek or anybody to come in. They came in when they wanted to come in, when their leader decided, oh, it's time for us to grow. It's time for us to increase the tax base and things of that nature. I hope that answered your question. At least
Yes, it's more complicated than
absolutely.
yeah.
It always is.
So my second question, which is speculative, and it is we have zealots, or Israel has zealots now. And would you compare the hilltop settlement people to the zealots during the Roman time?
One of my rules as a rabbi is never to discuss politics. I don't think that you will find in any synagogue everybody agreeing with one political position or another. And I rather not annoy half my congregation. So it's one of my rules.
Yeah.
I never discuss politics. That's not to say that they don't try to tempt me or to challenge me or to ask me questions, much like you did. And I totally respect it. But I would let somebody else, although I have a very clear opinion, I will let somebody else address this issue because I don't touch politics. And what you ask me deals with political environment and situation in Israel.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I respect your position. Yes.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ria.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know that Jeffrey Sachs was probably laughing because he heard me many times. He's my congregant. He's sitting there saying that I don't discuss politics or political issues. So I try not to get into it, to stay out of it.
I just wanted to say, Diane asked for a
There's two people talking. Hold on. Rabbi Marsha, I think Eleanor is.
Thank you.
Okay, Rabbi.
Diane, you were looking for a basic sort of just a general book on sort of, you know, Jewish history, sort of comprehensive. Michael Seltzer has a book. I don't know if it's still in print, but I will. I'm looking for it right now so I can put a link to it in the chat. So hold on for a moment. It's a general overview. It's actually a pretty easy read too, which is one of the reasons I appreciate it. So is that the kind of thing you're looking for?
Yes, in simple terms that I could understand, because I've been trying to educate myself for a long, long time, and I don't have a good sense right now of the continuity of Jewish history and the implications, such as the rabbi was speaking about today, the global implications. It's earth shaking to me, and I really want to grasp it. So thank you.
Yes, what you're really, are you looking for Israel or sort of, ancient Jewish history?
Maybe it's ancient Jewish history, such as we're discussing today.
Eli.
Ellie.
Ellie, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I am reading a book called The Core of Judaism. It gives you an explanation about unbelievable history, how we started. I'm not saying this is true. I have no idea, but it is very, very good. It has from the Tanakh to down to this guy. Let's see, I'm in the middle of it. I cannot find the content, but if you can find the book, I found it on Amazon, and it was actually recommended by Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein. It has a show on what they call them. Hold on. A pod, a
podcast.
A podcast, thank you. And he recommended this book, and I have been reading it, and it's like I never seen anything like this before. It's very good. The wealth of the country, the Canaanites, on account of their extensive they had trade. He goes through everything. This book goes through every single aspect of Judaism, and it's very good. It's very long, and you can get it on Amazon.
Ellie, are you talking who produced that podcast?
Ezra Klein.
Oh, Ezra Klein, no one better.